محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن عليا ولي الله، أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير الأمل، حي على خير الأمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. My salat will be qasr. I'll recite 2 units and then you complete the salat as usual. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahu Akbar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانهر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوار نبيك محمد وآله عليه السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير الأمل. حي على خير الأمل. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. اللهم صل. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته يقوم ويقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك بحق محمد وآله الأطهار. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم يا سريع الرضا. اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران. لا أدري أفي سهل هو أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من. وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا ربي رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، ومأخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، وجد على عبدك بفضلك، إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى ناصح الأمين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم يا تسة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن وكعبة الإيمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وصحل الله تعالى مخرجك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
پر محمد و آل محمد بلند ترین صلوات. اللہ
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. الحمد للہ رب العالمین الرحمن الرحیم مالک یوم الدین. ایاک نعبد و ایاک نستعین. اہدنا الصراط المستقیم صراط الذین انعمت علیہم غیر المغضوب علیہم ولا الضالین. صلوات.
بر محمد و آل محمد بلند تر صلوات. آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ سو جا. آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ سو جا. جاگتی ماں نے کہا میری سکینہ سو جا ہے. آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ سو جا. جو تجھے خوف ہے شاید میں اسے کم کر دوں. آجا آنکھوں پہ تیرے نادے علی دم کر دوں. دور کیوں بیٹھی ہے میری سکینہ سو جا ہے. آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ سو جا. باپ کے سینے پہ عادت ہے تجھے سونے کی. میری گودی تیرے قابل تو نہیں ہے پھر بھی. ہے میرے دل کی صدا میری سکینہ سو جا ہے. آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ سو جا. 4 برسوں سے نہ زحمت دی کبھی تو نے مجھے. اپنی خدمت کا مجھے آج تو موقع دے دے. ہوگا احسان تیرا میری سکینہ سو جا ہے. آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ
سو جا، قید خانے میں جو آ جائیں گے تیرے بابا، خود اٹھا دوں گی میں شانہ ہلا کر تیرا، اچھا کچھ دیر ذرا میری سکینہ سو جا ہے، آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ سو جا، مجھ سے دیکھا نہیں جاتا یہ تیرا درد جگر، یہ بتاتے ہوئے اچھا تو نہیں لگتا مگر، اب نہ آئیں گے چچا میری سکینہ سو جا ہے، آجا اصغر کی جگہ میری سکینہ سو جا۔
بآواز بلند صلوات۔ ہوئے جب شام کے زندان میں کوہرام بپا، بین سے بالی سکینہ کے لرزتی ہے فضا، سرد ہے سارا بدن، زرد ہے غم سے چہرہ، آہ کرتی ہے تو ہل جاتا ہے زنداں سارا، خواب سے چونک کے اٹھ بیٹھی ہے روتی روتی، اپنے سینے سے لگائے ہوئے بیٹھی ہے پھوپھی، رو کے کہتی ہے کہ بابا میرے پاس آئے تھے، پھوپھی اماں وہ یہیں پاس میرے بیٹھے تھے، اور مجھ سے کہتے تھے میرا دل نہیں لگتا بیٹی، آجا اب آجا میری گود میں، آجا بیٹی، کب سے بے چین ہوں، صورت تو دکھا دو مجھ کو، پھوپھی اماں میرے بابا سے ملا دو مجھ کو، وہ یہیں ہوں گے کہیں آپ ذرا دے تو صدا، کہیے ان سے میری جانب سے کہ بیٹی ہو فدا، دور ہی سے ذرا آواز سے پھٹ جائے گا بیٹی کا کلیجہ بابا بخش دو مجھ کو اگر کی ہو کوئی میں نے خطا ہوں سزاوار پر اتنی نہ سزا دو مجھ کو شکر اللہ کا مشکل ہوئی آسان میری کٹ گئے قید کے دن آ گئی رخصت کی گھڑی اب سفر خیر سے گزرے یہ دعا دو مجھ کو ہے خوشی کی یہ گھڑی آپ نہ کیجئے پرنم آپ کو دیتی ہوں میں اون محمد کی قسم مسکراتے ہوئے جانے کی رضا دو مجھ کو بند ہوئی جاتی ہے آنکھیں میری دیکھیں تو ذرا لوریاں دیتی ہے مجھ کو کوئی مانوس صدا نیند آتی ہے پھوپھی جان سلا دو مجھ کو مانگیے اب نہ دعائیں میرے جینے کے لیے دیکھیے آ گئے بابا مجھے لینے کے لیے قبلہ رو کر کے پھوپھی جان لیٹا دو مجھ کو ہائے تقدیر کے مر کر بھی رہی زندہ میں قبر بھی پائی تو بچی نے وہی زندہ میں کیا خطا کی تھی سکینہ نے بتا دو مجھ کو کب سے بے چین ہوں صورت تو دکھا دو مجھ کو پھوپھی اماں میرے بابا سے ملا دو مجھ کو درود بھیجیے گا محمد و آل محمد پر جب رہا شام کے زنداں سے ہوئے اہل حرم کیا خوشی ہوتی دوبالا ہوا سادات کا غم جس کو ارمان رہائی تھا ہوئی وہ بے دم ایک ننھی سی لحد پر تھا مسلسل ماتم
سن کے فریاد و فغاں سانس رکی جاتی تھی، قبر سے بالی سکینہ کی صدا آتی تھی، وطن جانے والوں مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو۔ میں کیسے رہوں گی یہاں پر، ہائے میں کیسے رہوں گی یہاں پر، یہاں ہے بھلا کون میرا، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو۔ رہا ہو کہ گھر جانے والوں مجھے بھی کہیں پر بٹھا لو، شہیدوں کے سر ہیں جہاں پر، مجھے بھی وہیں پر سلا لو، میں بابا کے سر سے لپٹ کر، ہے میں بابا کے سر سے لپٹ کر سفر کاٹ لوں گی یہ سارا، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو۔ نہ یوں چھوڑ کر جاؤ اماں مجھے شامیوں کے سہارے، یتیمی کی ماری ہوئی کو ستایا بہت ظالموں نے، بہت خوف آتا ہے مجھ کو تمہیں واسطہ سیدہ کا، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو۔ جو پہنچے مدینے تو اماں پھر رختے مصیبت نہ آئے، سنا اور اکبر کی باتیں سنانے کی نوبت نہ آئے، میری لاش کو دیکھ کر ہی ہے، میری لاش کو دیکھ کر ہی سمجھ لے گی ہر بات صغرا، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو، مجھے بھی وطن لے چلو۔ یہی سوچ کر زیر تربت تڑپتا ہے دکھیا کا لاشا، مجھے شمر کے شہر میں اب ہمیشہ ہی رہنا پڑے گا، دھڑکتا نہیں پھر بھی اماں ہے، धड़कता नहीं फिर भी अम्मा, ये दिल कांप जाता है मेरा, मुझे भी वतन ले चलो, मुझे भी वतन ले चलो। ये हालत थी हर एक कदम पर, मदीने के रास्ते में अकबर, गिरी थी जहाँ पर सकीना, तमाचे लगे थे जहाँ पर, वहाँ खाक से कैदियों को है, वहाँ खाक से कैदियों को सदाएं ये आती थी हर जा, मुझे भी वतन ले चलो, मुझे भी वतन ले चलो। पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद बुलंदतर सलावत।
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا، وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين، الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين، والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والسولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والإبادة السجادية والمآثر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الرذوية والجود الثقفية والنقابة النقبية والحيبة العسكرية والغيبة الإلهية. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه الكريم وقرآنه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ويقول الذين كفروا لست مرسلا، قل كفى بالله شهيدا بيني وبينكم ومن عنده علم الكتاب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra in particular, a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. For the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time, a louder salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The verse in question is the 43rd verse of the 13th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Ra'd. Within this verse, Allah, He says, وَيَقُولُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَسْتَ مُرْسَلًا. That when the disbelievers, when the kuffar say that you are not a messenger, O Rasulullah, say to them, قُلْ كَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكُمْ. Say to them that enough between me and you is that Allah is a witness, that Allah is a shaheed, that Allah is a gawah. وَمَنْ عِنْدَهُ إِلْمُ الْكِتَابِ. And alongside Allah, that individual who has the knowledge of the entire book. Within this verse over here, the first point of analysis is that when it came to establishing the prophethood of Rasulullah, we find that Rasulullah does not say that the testimony of Allah is sufficient over here. But rather he says that alongside the testimony of Allah, there is the testimony of an individual who has been given knowledge of the entire book. I say that if according to the Quran, Allah's word and Allah's reality was not the only reality to establish the reality of Rasulullah and his prophethood, then how is the Quran enough for the iman of the Muslims? Because the Quran has given a principle that alongside Allah, there is the one who has been given ilm of the entire book over here. Now the discussion from the first level when we come to the analysis of this verse is that who is that individual who has been given knowledge of the book? When you look at the tafasir of other schools of thought, you find, for example, they would say that this verse was revealed about Abdullah ibn Salam, or it was revealed about At-Tamim al-Dari, or it was revealed about Salman al-Farsi. In other words, any individual who was a Christian or a Jew who became Muslim, then that individual has the knowledge of the book, and he is one of the supports and witnesses for the messengership of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Now you find that there are two levels of reply towards this objection. The first level of reply is that where was this ayat of Surah Al-Ra'd revealed? When you look at this verse of Surah Al-Ra'd, you find that it was revealed in Makkah. These individuals, they became Muslim in Medina, because Medina was that maqam where Rasulullah would preach to the Jews, to the Christians, and they would accept Islam. But this ayat was revealed in Makkah. In other words, that individual who had knowledge of the book must be such an individual that in Medina he was with Rasulullah, in Makkah he was with Rasulullah. From the second level, when we look at the traditions, we find that Tabari in his tafsir, quoting from Al-Thalabi, says that this verse was revealed about none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So the question arises that if this verse that says that Amir al-Mu'mineen has the knowledge of the book is been revealed about Ali bin Abi Talib, then number one, we need to understand what is this verse saying. Number two, how does this relate to the messengership of Rasulullah? Because what was an objection within this verse was the risala of Rasulullah. That is why they said, وَيَقُولُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَسْتَ مُرْسَلًا, that, O messenger, when the disbelievers say that you are not a messenger, you said, number one, you have the witnessing of Allah, and you have the witnessing of this individual. So there must be a link at the second level between Ali bin Abi Talib and Risala. But from the third level, what is this ilm of Amir al-Mu'mineen that's being manifested within this ayat? And based upon these 3 points, we'll come to an understanding of this verse. Now, when it comes to this ayat, you find that the first principle that I mentioned within this verse is that the subject of question is the messengership or the risala of Rasulullah. And the answer to that are the 2 evidences and witnesses to the risala of Rasulullah, meaning Allah, and the one was the knowledge of the entire book. You know, in mantiq, we have a principle that the dalil and the evidence must be of the same nature as the subject matter. When it comes to chemistry, you're not going to use that evidence which you find in philosophy or mathematics. If in chemistry you want to know that the boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius, your evidence and your dalil is experimentation. That you will warm water up and time again you will notice that it boils at 100 degrees Celsius, and you will use the methods of chemistry to come to that conclusion. In mathematics, you're not going to use the evidence for philosophy. In mathematics, when you want to establish that the 3 corners of a triangle, they equal the same degree as 2 lines, you find you'll use the principles of mathematics. In philosophy, you'll use the rules of philosophy and logic. But over here, the subject of analysis is nabuwat and risalat. So whatever the dalil and the evidence for risalat and messengership is, that evidence must be of the same nature as what risalat is. And what is risalat? You find that the risalat from one level is the connection between this world and the ghaib and the unseen. In other words, if risalat is the connection between this world and the unseen, the one with the dalil and the evidence for messengership must have a connection with the ghaib as well. If the dalil and the evidence for risalat and messengership is a mu'jiza and a miracle, then the one who is an evidence for Rasulullah, his very zat and essence must be a mu'jiza and a miracle. You see, in what ways is the Quran a miracle? When this verse it says, وَيَقُولُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَسْتَ مُرْسَلًا, that when the disbelievers say you are not a messenger, say to them, O Rasulullah, between me and you, number 1, Allah is a witness. You see, what does it mean for Allah to witness something? You and I, when we're a witness, we see it with our senses or we're testifying with our tongue. But oftentimes, even though the same word is used for us and it's used for Allah, there is a difference in the way that is being carried out. For example, when you and I have actions, you find that we have actions and Allah has actions. But there is a difference between our act and Allah's act. Because when we want to act, we look at the benefit of something. If the benefit outweighs, if the benefit is significant, then we prefer action to inaction. But Allah is not influenced by benefit. But rather from the actions of Allah, we understand that there is wisdom. It's not that wisdom and benefit is the only thing Allah is after. That is already present within Him. So in other words, when we witness and when Allah witnesses, there's a difference. The shahadat and the witnessing of Allah is not in His words, but it's in His action. So over here, when the Quran it says that Allah is a witness in between me and you, in other words, this is a reference that the kalam of Allah, the Quran, is in between me and you. And if nabuwat itself, its evidence is i'jaz and miracles, then the Quran itself must be a miracle. You see, one of the qualities of the Quran is the linguistic miracle. But over here, people, they may say that yes, the Quran was revealed amongst those who speak Arabic. If the Quran's miracle was only linguistic, then it's not a miracle for those individuals who don't understand the Arabic language. So you find that a miracle is something from one level which brings a knowledge that is before its time period and not through the normal means. In other words, one of the miracles of Hazrat Isa, of Jesus, is that Jesus would cure the leper and he would heal the blind. In today's society, there are doctors who are able to heal the leper and cure the blind. But what was the miracle of Isa alayhi salam? His miracle is that he brought that ilm and that knowledge before his time period, number one. And from the second level, he brought that knowledge through means which were not normal over there. You know, a miracle and a mu'jaza is not something which is impossible. A miracle and a mu'jiza, Allah cannot create that which is impossible, not because there is a limitation in Allah, but rather there is a limitation in the object. Allah doesn't create a square circle, because the property of a square contradicts the property of a circle. That's why those people who say that can Allah not take Yazid to heaven? The reply is, it's not that there is any shortcoming in the rahmat of Allah, but rather you find this individual doesn't have the capacity to go to heaven because he was responsible for the killing of the imam of his time period. So you find that that capacity, it comes over there. But a miracle is to carry out an action through those means which are not available commonly. So you find in that sense, to bring forth a knowledge before its time period is the means of a miracle. When we look in the Quran, we find that there were many concepts within the Quran which were before its time period. For example, the Quran says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَوْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. It says this Quran, these skies, we have established it. And we are those who expand these skies and this universe. You know, today we know that the universe is in a constant state of expansion. But the Quran is saying that we are the ones who spread it out. We are the ones who expand it. In other words, this ayat from the Quran is miraculous in what sense? It's miraculous in the sense that it is bringing a knowledge and an ilm before its time period. Now, if this ayat is saying that this individual who has knowledge of the entire book, he is a dalil for Rasulullah, like the Quran is a dalil for Rasulullah, then that knowledge which is in the Quran, that knowledge should be within him as well. And if the Quran is bringing knowledge before its time period, then he should bring knowledge which is before his time period. And that is why when it says he has knowledge of the book within this ayat, the question is that what book is being referred to over here? Is it just the book of laws and sharia, or is it another book which is being referred to? You see, when you look in another verse of the Quran, it speaks about the incident of Sulaiman. And when Sulaiman wants to bring the throne of Bilqis, the queen of Sheba, the Quran says in that ayat that قَالَ إِفْرِيتٌ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ إِنِّي آتِيكَ بِهِ قَبْلَ أَن تَقُومَ مِن مَّقَامِكَ, that I will bring that throne, O Sulaiman, before you stand up from that spot which you're sitting. But then after that, that's Quran says, Qala, the one who had knowledge from the book. The one who had Qala ilmun min al-kitab. The one who had knowledge from the book, he said that I will bring it before the blinking of an eye. Now to bring the throne of Bilqis, the queen of Sheba, this ilm of the kitab wasn't a matter of sharia over here. It was to bring a throne which is on the other side of the world in front of you. In other words, this kitab is that book of the knowledge of realities, of the haqaiq of the universe, of the existential truths. And the one who has that knowledge is the one who can sit on the mimbar and say, Saluni, Saluni, qabla an tafkiduni. Inni a'rafu bi turuq as-sama'i min turuq al-ardi. He says that, ask me before you lose me. For I am more aware of the path of the heavens than the path of the earth. So you see, when it comes to understanding this ayat, a key fundamental position is that to understand Amir al-Mu'mineen as a mu'jiza, is that we need to understand that Ali bin Abi Talib would bring forth ilm which was before his time period. And when you examine these different realms of the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you'll find that in the truest sense of the word, it is nothing less than a mu'jiza and a miracle. For example, from the first level, when it comes to the examination of the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen, there is a field which is called ilmun nafs. Ilmun nafs is the study of the soul of a person, which in modern words, psychology can apply to a portion of the science. Psychology is not the study of ilmun nafs in its entirety, but rather it applies to a portion of this field. You know, today in psychology, we understand that oftentimes there are things within our subconscious, in our aqlul batini, which influences our actions later on. For example, an individual who is abused in childhood, that individual has such psychological trauma at times that even without recognizing at the level of the subconscious, you find that it impacts him in his actions in his day-to-day life. It's something which we understand clearly within the modern world. But you find that this reality is something which Amir al-Mu'mineen alluded to 1400 years ago. Amir al-Mu'mineen, in a tradition, he says, Ma admara imra'un fi qalbihi shay'an illa wa dahara ala qasamati wajhihi wa lafatati lisanih. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that there is nothing a person hides in his heart except that it makes itself apparent upon his face and upon the mistakes of his tongue. In other words, if you are hiding something, if you are hiding iman and belief, or whether you disbelieve, eventually from the level of the subconscious, you are going to slip up. And your reality is going to come forward at the highest level. You know, there was a group of individuals in the time of Rasulullah. When Rasulullah was going past the strait, the valley of Aqaba, they decided that they would scare the camel of Rasulullah, and Rasulullah would fall into the valley. As those individuals, they gathered at the nighttime to scare the camel of Rasulullah, you find that the lightning, it comes, Rasulullah sees the faces of those individuals, and he tells Hudayfa al-Yamani. That's why Hudayfa was called the one who would differentiate between the mu'mineen and the munafiqeen. You know what this means? Is that after the death of Rasulullah, people would watch Hudayfa al-Yamani. If Hudayfa prayed in the Namaz janaza, in the Salatul Mayyat of an individual, they would say this person is okay, he is a mu'min. But if Hudayfa doesn't pray in the Salatul Mayyat of an individual, they would know that this individual is a munafiq and a hypocrite. Now the tradition, it says, that which is hidden in the heart, it will become apparent in the mistakes of the tongue. You know, these individuals who were there to scare Rasulullah's camel so the Prophet would fall in, they would come to Hudayfa and they would say, oh Hudayfa, were we one of those individuals? In other words, what were they doing? By mistake, they were admitting to their crime. If there was a robbery in someone's house and I go to the owner of the house and I say to him that, was I one of the thieves? What are you saying? If you're not one of the thieves, you don't have to ask, was I one of them? But the fact that they would ask Hudayfa, it goes to show that what was within them became apparent outwards. And you find before anyone spoke of this concept of the subconscious, from the first level, this was elucidated by Amir al-Mu'mineen. From the second level, in what ways does the ilm of Amir al-Mu'mineen precede his time period? You know, today, when it comes to the area of law, you find that there are different mechanisms to establish who did the crime and who was innocent. In the olden days, all they would use is witnessing. If there were witnesses for the crime, you know the crime that it occurred. But today we have different mechanisms. For example, we have DNA tests. And we have cameras. We have other methods to see if somebody was at the crime scene. You know, Rasulullah would say, إِنَّمَا أَقْضِي بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَالْإِيمَانِ. I judge in between you with what is bayinat and with belief. You know, traditionally in the Muslim world, if you look at all of the early jurists, they would say that bayinat is simply two male witnesses, for example. That if there were two male witnesses who saw a crime, then you would know that this is a clear proof and that individual had committed the crime. But you find that Sayyid al-Khui and Shaheed Baqir al-Sadr, when they wanted to understand the different mechanisms for establishing the guilt of a person, they based it on one hadith and tradition of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And that tradition showed that a bayana is not just two male witnesses, but rather something which leads to yaqeen and certainty is also evidence to say someone is guilty. And that was based upon the tradition of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that it is stated two women, they come to the imam. And when these two women, they came to the imam, there were two children with them. There were two infants. One infant was a male infant, and the other was a female infant. Both of those women said that this male infant, it belongs to us, and the other woman is lying, the female infant is theirs. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that at this moment, we will weigh the breast milk of both of these women. And whichever breast milk is heavier, it belongs to the woman who had the male child. And in that manner, Amir al-Mu'mineen judged who the mother of the male child was. When they said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, how did you know this? He says, have you not read the verse of the Quran, Ad-Dakar bi-haddil untayayn? That a male, his capacity, his had, his amount is of two females. So you find in this manner, Amir al-Mu'mineen, time and time again, he shows that if I am going to be a witness for the Risala of Rasulullah next to Allah within this ayat, then I have to show a miracle. And that miracle is the ilm and the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen preceding the time period where he was in. That's why when you look at all of the different intellectual schools in Islamic thought, whether in tafsir al-Quran, whether in ilm al-kalam and theology, whether in mysticism and spirituality, whether in Arabic grammar, you find all of them lead to Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. For example, in theology, the first school of theology within the Muslim world was the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila was a branch that believed in rationalism and understanding the deen. You find the founder of the Mu'tazila was an individual by the name of Wasil ibn Ata. Wasil ibn Ata was the student of Abu Hashim, the son of Muhammad al-Hanafiya, who was the son of whom? He was the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. The second school in theology was the school of the Asharites. The Ashaira, they took their theology, they based it off the arguments of the Mu'tazila who ended with Amir al-Mu'mineen. So you find this is theology. When it comes to ilm al-Quran, the tafsir of the Quran, the greatest scholar of tafsir, even amongst the non-Shia, amongst the companions, is who? It is Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas was asked, Ma ilmuka wa ma ilmu ibn ammik? That what is your knowledge and what is the knowledge of Ali bin Abi Talib? Ibn Abbas replies by saying that I am like a drop of rain. And Ali in reality is like all of the oceans. My ilm in front of the ilm of Ali bin Abi Talib is like the ilm of a drop in front of all of the oceans within the world. So you find this individual ascribes his knowledge to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Even when you look at the different mystical orders, the different Sufi turuq, you find that all of them, they go to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, except for one goes to Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. And Muhammad bin Abi Bakr is raised by none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. So you find every level of ilm is represented within the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. That's why we find in a tradition that Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir in a tradition would say, Sharrika wa gharribaka. لن تجد علما صحيحا إلا عندنا أهل البيت عليهم السلام. That go to the east and go to the west. You will not find that knowledge except for with us, Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Now, does this line mean that other individuals have not given any form of wisdom? No, this line doesn't mean that you don't go to other sources. But what this means, that if there is a source which is a hujjah, if there is a source whose knowledge there is no doubt within, if there is a source who was called by the Quran, ar-rasikhuna fil ilm, those who are grounded in knowledge, then that source is only these 14 individuals. And that is these individuals. You see, for one's knowledge to be at the highest level, you find that ismat goes alongside knowledge. You see, to understand the ilm of an imam, we have to understand isma as well. Because when a person, they make a mistake, either they make a mistake because their knowledge is lacking, or they make a mistake because they don't have willpower, or they make a mistake because their desire overpowers their knowledge. But these are those individuals, their knowledge has no shortcomings, thus their isma and their infallibility has no shortcomings. You know, the verse of the Quran, it says, Ya ayyuhalladina amanu ittaqullah wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. That, O you who believe, have taqwa and be with those who are sadiq. You know, the word sadiq does not just mean don't lie. When you look at the ayat of the Quran, the word sadiq is something which is much deeper than that. For example, the Quran says in a different ayat, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. That indeed the believers are those who believe in Allah and His Prophet, and ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا. After that, there is no hesitation. وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. That these are those individuals, they strive in the way of Allah with their wealth, with their very selves, and you find these are those individuals who are sadiq. So over here, the Quran isn't saying that just don't lie and you become sadiq. No, the Quran is saying jihad with your nafs, with your wealth, to believe in Allah and His Prophet, to not hesitate. All of this is the sign of a Sadiq individual. You know, when Fakhruddin al-Razi, who was not a Shia, did the tafsir of this ayat, he says that when I looked at all of the verses in the Quran which talked about who is Sadiq, I found that all of these verses show that there must be a ma'soom and an infallible entity. And the fact that this ayat of the Quran is commanding that, O you who believe, be with the sadiqun, be with those who are sadiq, it goes to show that there must be a ma'soom in every time period. Now the discussion is, who is that ma'soom? Is that ma'soom the entire ummah of Rasulullah? Now you say to them that we asked you to accept the infallibility of one, Ali bin Abi Talib. You rejected the infallibility of Ali, but you were ready to make the entire ummah ma'soom. You find that is something which isn't rational. The second group, they said that it is the companions of Rasulullah who are ma'soom. I say, if the companions are infallible, why is it that Rasulullah says, Wayha Ammarin? تَقْتُلُهُ فِئَةٌ بَاغِيَةٌ. That woe, my sorrow for Ammar, that an oppressive group will kill Ammar. On that day of Siffin, Ammar bin Yasir is on one side, companions are on the other side. So it goes to show if everyone is correct, they should be on the same side. So the companions are not masoom. If it means that all of the wives of Rasulullah are masoom, then Salma says to a wife that when you reach the land of Hawra in Iraq, and the dogs of Hawra begin to bark at you, then know you have made a mistake. You find the wives were in disagreement as well. If they were masoom, everyone would be on the same page. But no, if there is a group who is in agreement, it is that group about whom Rasulullah says, أَوَّلُنَا Muhammad wa akhiruna Muhammad wa awsatuna Muhammad wa kulluna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. You find that is that group which is in harmony. The first of us is Muhammad, the last of us in Muhammad. In between we are Muhammad, all of us are Muhammad. And you find that harmony comes in the ilm and the knowledge of these individuals. So you find Amir al-Mu'mineen at one level in ilm and nafs, he shows his knowledge. From the second level, we find that even in different fields of the Islamic sciences, the knowledge of the Imam is there. From the third level, we see in qada and rulings, the ilm of the Imam is there. But from the fourth level, our belief within the school of Ahlul Bayt, because the ilm of the Imams is a very fundamental subject of analysis when it comes to the aqaid of the 12 Shiyas, you find our belief is that even in the secular sciences, the Imams don't make a mistake. You know, other schools of thought have a hadith that an individual comes to Rasulullah. Rasulullah gives advice about farming and their crops did not yield properly. And then allegedly Rasulullah says that I am not a knowledgeable person in farming, thus you should have asked somebody else. Such hadith don't exist within our corpus of hadith literature. We find that within our literature, even subjects such as mathematics, the Imam answered. You know, one individual, he comes with 17 camels, 3 individuals. They come to Amir al-Mu'mineen. Now they have 17 camels in front of them. They want to divide it up as inheritance. He says one individual will get 1/2. Another individual would get 1/3. Another individual would get 1/9. But when you look at the number 17 doesn't divide by 2 or by 3 or by 9. So when they come to Amir al-Mu'mineen says, هَلْ لِي إِضَافَةٌ بِجَمَلٍ? That can I add 1 camel to your camels? At that point, you find the number becomes 18. The Imam says the one who is to receive 1/2, give him 9 camels. The one who is to receive 1/3, give him 6 camels. The one who is to receive 1/9, give him 2 camels. What is 9 plus 6 plus 2? 9 plus 6 plus 2 is 17. You have 1 camel left. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, now return my camel back towards me. I've solved your issue. You see, this is Ali bin Abi Talib. That when you come to the doorstep of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you don't have to go to any other doorstep. You know, they asked Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, who is more generous, you or Hatim al-Ta'i? You know, there was a proverbial figure amongst the Arabs whose generosity was famous. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, why don't you tell me about the generosity of Hatim? They say that Hatim had a complex with 7 doors. Whenever somebody would knock on the first door, Hatim would give at that door. Then he would cover his face. He would give at the second, the third, the fourth, all the way to 7 doors. And the person wouldn't be embarrassed that they're asking from the same person time and time again. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am more generous than Hatim. They say, Ya Ali, what do you mean that you're more generous than Hatim? Amir al-Mu'mineen says that I would have given so much at that first doorstep they would not have had the need to knock at any other doorstep. In other words, when you come to the door of Ali bin Abi Talib, you receive so much at that door, you don't need to go to any other door. That's why you find that fiqh and law was at his doorstep. Spirituality was at his doorstep. You know, when you look at all of the statements of the Imam, you find that there are 3 traditions of the Imam that Ibn Abil Hadid al-Mu'tazili would say that these statements of Ali ibn Abi Talib are unparalleled in the Islamic world. One of them is in the realm of dua. One of them is in the realm of one's self-discipline. And one of them is in the realm of the community. He says when it comes for self-discipline or self-success, the statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which is unparalleled, is that statement which says, "Qimatu kulli imra'in ma yuhsinu." The value of every individual is based on what he acquires. In other words, your value is dictated by what you do within this world. But then he says, in the realm of dua, that statement of Ali, which is unparalleled, is that statement where the Imam, he says, "Ilahi kafali izzan an akuna laka abdan." That, oh my Lord, enough for izzah, enough for my might and my honor is that I am your servant and your abd, oh Allah. In other words, if anyone wants power, you know, izzah is related to the word power and it's related to the word honor. Izzah linguistically in Arabic means that which cannot be conquered or cannot be reached. That's why the Quran says, "Wal izzatu lillahi jami'an." That izzah in its finest sense, in the total sense of the word, it only belongs to Allah. But then in a different ayat it says, "Tu'izzu man tasha wa tudillu man tasha." Oh Allah, you are the one who gives to izzah who you want and you give honor to whom you want. In other words, Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying that in the totality of honor resides with Allah. There is one step to gain honor, and that step is to become an abd and a servant of Allah. And you find that amongst being an abd of Allah is to hold the love of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. You know, many of us who are khutaba or Noha Khans or Martiya Khans or different reciters, this honor which is given is not because of our own actions. At the end of the day, we are sinners, all of us. But this is the beauty of Ahlul Bayt, that you take their name, you recite their hadith, the more their name you take, the more honor that Allah gives towards you. You find Amir al-Mu'mineen is showing that this is also a manifestation of the ubudiyah of Allah. And then he says, وَكَفَى لِي فَخْرًا أَن تَكُونَ لِي رَبًّا. And oh Allah, if there is any pride that I have, my pride lies in the fact that you are my Lord, oh Allah. So you find that from the level, and you look an analysis of the different statements of Ali bin Abi Talib, the one whose knowledge preceded the time period he resided in, that individual is a mu'jiza and a miracle. And the one who is a mu'jiza and a miracle, that individual is the dalil and the evidence for the risala of Rasulullah. And in the way Amir al-Mu'mineen, you find that he was a mu'jiza. You find Imam al-Hussein carries that same capacity as well. I mean, it is nothing less than a miracle that when we look at Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura, that sometimes he lifts the body of Ali Akbar. And at one point he lifts the pieces of Qasim. And he picks up the arms of his brother Abbas. But Imam al-Hussein, he doesn't complain towards Allah. If we have anything from Imam al-Hussein, we find that he goes into sajda. And he says, Allahumma anta thiqati fi kulli karbin wa anta raja'i fi kulli shidda. That after all of this musibah, after all of this masaib, Imam al-Hussein says, "Oh Allah, I rely upon you in every karb and difficulty. And oh Allah, you are my hope in every shidda and severity. وَكُلِّ عَمْرٍ نَزَلَ بِي ثِقَةٌ وَعُدَّةٌ, and you are my support in every matter." This line on the day of Ashura is nothing less than a mu'jiza and a miracle from Sayyid al-Shuhada. That this Imam, he had sabr despite those events, and despite knowing what his sisters would go through when they go after Karbala. You see, these days we've entered are those days where Ahlul Bayt, they begin to reach Sham. You know, Sham is that musibah. When they said to Imam Zainul Abidin, "O Sajjad, what was the most difficult time?" Imam Zainul Abidin didn't say it was Karbala. He didn't say it was that moment where Shimar jalisun ala sadr al-Hussein, when Shimar is sitting upon the chest of my father. Imam is Sajjad, he says, Asham, Asham, Asham. You know, one hadith, Imam Zainul Abidin, he says that when we were taken to Sham, we were upon mules which had no saddles upon them. We were surrounded from all sides by the army of Yazid. In front of us was the head of Hussein. And if any one of us would cry, they would take the points of their arrows and they would strike us at that moment. You know, the tradition, it says that when they reached the outskirts of Sham, for several hours, Ahlul Bayt would stand at Babu Sa'a or Babu Sa'at. And you know, when they would stand at that door, one individual, he would take the head of Imam al-Hussein and he would hang it upon the door of Sham. As the head of Imam al-Hussein hangs upon that door, Kulthum would say, "Wa Jadda ya Rasulullah, hada rasu habibik al-Hussein masluban." That, "Oh Rasulullah, this is the head of Hussein hanging, oh Rasulullah." Then that moment it would come that they would decorate the courtyard. They would decorate the bazaar and the marketplace in Sham. You know, when they would go, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir says that from all sides they would yell that the Bughat, the Baghi, the rebels have come, that they would throw rocks at us in the bazaar of Sham. But then he says, one point it came that from the tops of the homes they would pour boiling water upon my father Zainul Abidin. When they poured that water, the amama of my father, the turban of my father would catch on fire. You know, when they were in Sham, there was a companion of Rasulullah by the name of Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi. Sali comes to Imam Zainul Abidin and he says, "I was a sahabi of your grandfather." The Imam says, "Oh Sal, if you have love for my grandfather, then go and bring me a piece of cloth, O Sal." Sally says, "I didn't understand, why does this man want a piece of cloth?" Sally says, "When I brought that cloth to this individual, he takes that cloth and he puts it in between the chain within his neck. And he says, 'Oh Sal, from Kufa towards Sham, this chain has been burning my neck.'" You know, after they go to the courtyard of Sham, you find a point it comes that Ahlul Bayt are freed. When they're freed, Imam Zainul Abidin says that the first condition is that you give us a house to mourn in, because these women, they haven't mourned. The second condition I have is that you return all of the heads back towards us. You see, when the heads were coming, Kulthum would take the head of Abbas. and Layla would take the head of Ali Akbar. And Rabab would see the head of Ali Asghar, and she would say, Amitluka tunhar. That, oh Asghar, did they slaughter children like you, O Ali Asghar? And then when the head of Imam al-Hussein would come, all of the women would stand out of ihtaram, and they would say, Wa Husseina, Wa Ghariba, Wa Mazluma. You know, after the heads come, all of the tabarrukat and those items, they began to come. You know, the first thing to come was an alam and a flag. When that flag, it comes, you find that they remember Abu Fatila. The second thing to come were 2 earrings. When those earrings, they came, all of the women look at Rabab. The one who would wear those earrings was buried in that prison in Sham. The final item to come was that one ring it came. You know which ring it was that? When Mukhtar, he catches a man by the name of Bajdal. Mukhtar says, oh Bajdal, what did you do on the day of Ashura? Bajdal, he says, everyone was looting the body of Hussein. Somebody would take the shirt of Hussein. Somebody would take the amama of Hussein. I saw that there was a ring on the hand of Hussein. When I wanted to take that ring, it wouldn't come out. So at that moment, I take my sword. I cut the finger. على لعنة الله للقوم الظالمين ماتم حسين يا حسين.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Sham ka bazar, abid bimar. 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 पाँव में बेड़ी तो गिराबां शाम का बाजार आबिद बीमार शाम का बाजार आबिद बीमार भूलेगा ना वो मंजर नेज़े पे सरे सरवर भूलेगा ना वो मंजर नेज़े पे सरे सरवर बेमकनाओ बेचादर बलवे में फुपी मादर और मजमाए कुफार आबिद बीमार शाम का बाजार आबिद बीमार शाम का बाजार बाजार की ज़ेबाई कोटों पे तमाशाई कोटों पे तमाशाई आदा की सफाराई और आलम तन्हाई वो बेकसो लाचार आबिद बीमार शाम का बाजार आबिद बीमार शाम का बाजार दरबार में सर उरिया आते हैं हरम गिरिया उठने लगा एक तूफान چشم ہے دربار
عابد بیمار شام کا بازار عابد بیمار شام کا بازار عابد بیمار
بھولے گا نہ وہ منظر نیزے پہ سر سرور
گانا وہ منظر نیزے پہ سرے سرور
بے مکناؤ بے چادر بلوے میں پھپھی مادر اور مجمع کفار عابد بیمار شام کا بازار
عابد بیمار
شام کا بازار
عابد بیمار
بو پائی تو گھبرا کر بچی نے کہا رو کر
آئی تو گھبرا کر بچی نے کہا رو کر
اس دشت میں ہے جو سر وہ تو ہے سر سرور کیسے کرو دیدار عابد بیمار شام کا بازار عابد بیمار شام کا بازار کچھ شمر سے فرما دو گردن میری کھلوا دو
سے فرما دو گردن میری کھلوا دو
سر بابا کا دلوا دو یا اس کو یہ سمجھا دو مارے نہ ستمگار عابد بیمار
شام کا بازار عابد بیمار شام کا بازار
عابد بیمار شام کا بازار عابد
بیمار شام کا بازار عابد بیمار یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو پابند نہ ہوا ہے پابند نہ ہوا ہے رونے پہ نہ پہرا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ تنہا ہو تھی جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے پر تھی جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے پر زندہ در زندہ ہے زندہ در زندہ اس کے لیے قضا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب
کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز سسکنے کی زندانوں سے آتی تھی آواز سسکنے کی جیسے کہ سکینہ کو ہے جیسے کہ سکینہ کو ہر زندان رو رہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں کر زندہ کی دیواروں سے ٹکرائے نہ وہ کیوں کر زندہ کی دیواروں سے بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے ہے بھائی سے اور پھوپھی سے جس کو جدا کیا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ تنہا ہو تھی جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے پر تھی جس کو نیند آتی شبیر کے سینے پر زندہ در زندہ ہے زندہ در زندہ اس کے لیے قضا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو یا رب کوئی معصومہ زندہ میں نہ تنہا ہو پابند نہ ہو آہیں ہے پابند نہ ہو آہیں رونے پہ نہ پہرا ہو
محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا رسول الله خاتم النبيين السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين السلام عليك يا فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى ناصح العمين السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم يا قصة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس أنيس النفوس أيها المدفون بأرض توز. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا صاحب الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن وكعبة الإيمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.